Well, Eric, kicking things here off this week, as always, kind of just taking a step back and looking at some perspective of what just happened in January as we're just looking at those extreme bouts of cold, big winter storms that kind of wrapped up the later half of the month.
Mhm.
What's your perspective on kind of what happened last month and putting that towards the next piece of the puzzle for this month in terms of just kind of getting through the rest of this winter in terms of what we can expect here for the US?
Yeah. So today, of course, is Groundhog Day. So I just learned that the groundhog did see his shadow. He loves to do that. In fact, I was looking at this NOAA article that suggests that his accuracy in the last 10 years is about 30%. So we understand this is just for fun, but it is a great holiday. I'm going out to Pennsylvania later today, ironically, but I'm not going anywhere near Punxsutawney, Phil. But I will make sure that I watch Groundhog Day at some point today. So where's it going to lead us? He called for 6 more weeks of winter, and right now we just had a pretty massive Arctic front go all the way through the Caribbean and now ended up in this part of the East Pacific. And that's the last massive push on colder air. Now, what it came along with was a big snowfall event here, which hit parts of the Appalachian Mountains, North and South Carolina, even parts of Georgia as well. But remember, before that, we had a pretty sizable snowfall event that hit here with ice to the south. And I was in Nashville yesterday, and there's still ice everywhere because of how cold it has been. So, thinking this through, watch this. I love this animation. It's the European model predicting the depth of snow. So it's not telling you, it will tell you what's falling, but it'll also tell you if the snow is melting. So this is right now. As I go forward in time, watch Missouri, Illinois, Indiana as we get to the end of this week and toward the weekend. You see that? I see how that snow melting. I mean, it's gonna be warm, and we're gonna warm things up. But the only place that hangs on to the colder air is in the Northeast. But Dawson, I want you to watch next Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. There is a system coming out of Colorado, could hit parts of Nebraska and Iowa, bringing some snow into your area. It's out there pretty far, but we're watching it. It's about a 10-day forecast. We're keeping an eye on it here. But it's important to know that right now we're still locked into that cold air. Even though mild air is coming, Florida's having another very cold morning. And on Sunday, they saw temperatures getting down toward freezing just outside of Miami. That's how far to the south that cold air has made it. Okay, let's do a recap because you said, hey, where do we just come from? This is what the January precip stats look like. And you got to remember something. If you're in the plains, January is not your wet month. I mean, the only place where January is wet is the West. And so when you look at these stats, I want you to understand when you see dry, you're seeing really, really dry conditions. We started off the month as this is our soil moisture, and we finished it with this. I mean, so parts of the ice states got even worse with soil moisture going forward. Out west, we are not having a great year for snow. Yes, California's drought free. Yes, there's good snow in the Sierra Nevada, but like look at the North Platte, basin that feeds into the Platte River system. It's at record low, and you can do the same thing for the South Platte. I mean, this is a huge component to Nebraska's success in growing season is the irrigation water's out of this and they're so low. And so I'm just concerned about that and concerned about the rest of the mountains in the west not having adequate snowpack. Here's why. The jet's been doing fine coming out of Japan, but it's split across the west. And that split has allowed it to dive into deep troughs between the Great Lakes and Hudson Bay, which has got us so cold. It helps that the polar vortex for most of January was located somewhere here around Hudson Bay. And that's what gave us our temperature pattern in January, kind of split along a line north-south. We were much colder east and much warmer west. In fact, the last 2 weeks of January, we saw extremely cold weather coming into this section of the country, one of the top 5 to 10 coldest second halves of January on record. It also did a number on the Great Lakes. We're up to nearly 56% ice covered, so that's impressive. It's got a lot of that cold air coming in to do that. But here's the other big change, Dawson. At the beginning of January, La Nina. At the end of January, massive fade, and we're already seeing a warm up here. So that's it. That's our accounting of where we've been. Now let's figure out where we're going to go. I'm watching carefully the MJO coming out of phase 2 into phase 3, and that's going to be critical because a phase 3 would give us really good flow coming back across North America and start to excite some storm systems in the midsection of the country. It's not the next week. As you can see, a big section of the United States into the Canadian prairie is very dry. It's going to be out there into week 2 that we're getting excited about this. So over the next 7 days, unfortunately, so much of the Midwest, upper Midwest, plains, northern plains, Canadian prairie dry. So is the Southwest United States. This is the chance of going over 1/10 of an inch of liquid equivalent. But as you note here in this upper level height pattern, by the end of this week into early next week, models are showing a more robust wave dipping over the Rocky Mountains. And this will kick off a system somewhere out there. Again, like I told you a moment ago, February 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, somewhere in that vicinity. I was watching it in the new European model solution this morning as we just kind of play this forward, looking at where we have some systems. I just want to point out Tuesday, there's a little low that goes through the mid-south and over toward Kentucky, Tennessee, bringing rain farther to the south, maybe some snow in West Virginia. Other than that, I'm watching a little clipper come through late this week into the weekend that could hit the Great Lakes, maybe clipping parts of the eastern Corn Belt, getting into the northeast. But here we go. This is Saturday into Sunday, another little clipper coming through here. But look out west. We've not seen this in 3.5 weeks. And so to see a system trying to come through the west and show up in the middle part of the country by the 10th, 11th, and 12th, this is where we're starting to see the beginning of getting flow to do that. It's been doing this for so long. And I'm excited for it. I hope it happens because one, we could grab some decent snow. Take a look at our snowfall forecast out of this. Here we go. I mean, we're looking at a halfway decent accumulation out of those clippers, but that's mostly in the Great Lakes states or into Ontario. But look, that is the system right out there that I'm waiting on. It's out there at the 10th, 11th, 12th. We're just curious if we're going to get that one to come through. Okay, just want to make a point. This system is also showing up when we look at both models. Going back to my static maps, if you come out here to the 10th, 11th, 12th, both the GFS and the European are trying to produce some sort of low here, which has given me increased confidence in this. And you can also see out there when you look February 10th to the 16th, the models have now increased precipitation chances in this area after weeks of showing up so dry. It's all good news, Dawson, and that's what I really want to be able to see here. But in terms of temperatures, polar vortex is still disrupted. But we note that over the coming days, like the 5th, 6th, 7th, watch what happens. Polar vortex retreats, goes back over to Russia by mid-month, and that's going to signal some mild air coming in. So have a look at it. Here's today's highs getting into tomorrow. Look at the plains up in the 50s, maybe 60s. Wednesday into Thursday, while the east stays cold, the plains go warm, the west stays warm. The clipper comes through this weekend, dropping the temperatures back off in the northeast. But look at that mild air surging. And we really just see a lot of evidence that our temperature pattern is going to do this over the next 5 days. And by day 5 through 10, significant warm up for most of us, unless you're in the northeast. But Dawson, the most important thing to me to watch right now is if by mid-month we actually see this. Now, what is it? You drop cold in the west, there's a trough of low pressure, flow comes around it, ridge opens up, so that's warmth, that's rain, which we want. We need rain. We need to thaw these soils, and that is southwest flow. So I'm excited and hopeful, not because of what the groundhog saw, but more about what I think we could do by the time we get into this, I don't know, February 9th, 10th, 11th timeframe.
Yeah, definitely. And so, I mean, that kicks off kind of where you left us with last week is that historically, or not, kind of the models that you were looking at from previous years, lining up with this week, you left us off with, February would be a time that we have access to colder air, which could lead to some drier than normal conditions. And that might be the case here for the first week of February, as you kind of point out here. But so is that the shift that we're kind of seeing is that not as much access to cold air and leaning towards milder, which could bring in hand some better chances of precipitation moving through the latter half of the month.
I hope so. I really do hope so. And I'll show you this. This is the new 1 month outlook released by the Climate Prediction Center, but they made this last week. Imagine if they could have seen some of the changes we saw over the weekend, it would have given them a better thought process. Because I think later on in February, we do have access to this cold again. I think it comes back. But as we move toward the middle of the month, there's going to be some warmer conditions that build in. They did also release a new seasonal drought outlook. And these four corner states down here to the southern plains and then the southeast are still in the drought persists or even drought develops, while the mid-south tends to, and the Ohio Valley tends to go over a little bit wetter. I will point out that the newest outlook from let's call it February 8th to March 8th begins to open this up with a bit more precip, keeps a lot of the south drier. But I mean, I say drier, I don't mean dry. If we're going to get storm systems to come through here, we're likely going to be able to bring some moisture into the south as well. So this is not that bad of a look. But look at the GFS. The GFS even suppresses that dryness farther to the south and keeps the Great Lakes pretty active. Clippers first, and then systems coming in like this second. So that's a That's good. We're putting snow on the headwaters of river systems. We're putting rain in parts of the Corn Belt. I like this pattern. I hope it does come into fruition. I'll also show you the temperatures. Look at the new GFS. Now, this is a 1 week sliding window. So this is this week. That is week 2. And look how much more mild it is out there into week 3 and 4. See that? Now, it doesn't mean we won't have Arctic air coming in at times, but it's going to have to really work against what is, I think, some pretty mild air in places at times. So that's what I think I've got for us for the month of February. It'll be interesting
Yeah,
to see how it transitions.
Yeah, definitely some things to think about. And that could be a little bit more hopeful, especially as we're nearing, that spring planting season for a lot of folks. I mean, down in the South, they're going to be starting that a lot sooner than here in the Midwest, but just some things to keep an eye on here moving forward. Moving down to South America, though, what's the latest update on that? I know these last couple weeks, there's been a lot of chatter of, dry conditions, whether it be in Brazil. Looking down at Argentina, kind of seems like people were looking at that for maybe some weather premium here. What's the conditions down there in terms of what you're looking at?
Well, Dawson, I can start you off in Mato Grosso and show you that the update they gave on Friday, they're now about 25% planted. That's about double the typical percentage planted at this point. I think that's interesting because their Safrinha corn is going in slower than the 5-year average, so they're quickly harvesting, but the Safrinha corn didn't go in very fast. What do you have for national numbers out of Brazil?
Yeah, so national that came out this morning was looking at soybean harvest at 10%. That's only 1% above a year ago. So I mean, it seems like it might be a little bit slower on a national level compared to the Mato Grosso level. And
Yeah.
then on the Safrinha corn planting, that's only also 10% complete, which is actually below last year, which was 14%.
Yeah, and again, Mato Grosso is currently at 15 and a half and normal's 20 or so. So that's
Mhm.
important to note. I did look at this. I pulled up you mentioned the dryness in Argentina. So I pulled up the NDVI data for Buenos Aires, Cordoba, Santa Fe, and Entre Rios. And what I want to point out here is that the NDVI values were doing okay, and then they've taken a nosedive back toward average when they should be going up. Okay. So that tells you there's been some stress, and we can see that over the last 30 days, there's been some drought stress in Argentina. But what's interesting is if you take these off, in fact, let's just do it this way. Let's go back and say, show me admin level 1. That's the whole country. If I now just show you what Brazil is doing, I mean, Brazil just entered its 6th straight week of new record high in DVI. So this is maybe why we can't build in the weather premium on a small story that's happening in Argentina, knowing that the rest of South America seems to be making up for it. And then, just like we're talking about in the United States, the change in the pattern, well, over the next 2 weeks, watch this region because the next 7 days are drier, but week 2 is going over wetter. I think it's related to the same MJO transition. If that transition fails, and the US stays drier in the central part and southern Argentina stays drier, I think we have a compounding story that's going to be worth talking about. But right now, we're just going to look at the models and say, okay, let's just see how it all plays out. But it's always a week out. So let's just make sure we're staying ahead of it by remembering that we're always a week out in these transitions.
Yeah, definitely some things to keep in mind. And just as a little bit of a recap, so for the U.S., kind of expect mostly drier conditions going through the first week here, and then maybe be on the lookout for a little bit of access to some precipitation here moving forward, right?
That's it. And we need it. We need it to undo this. I think this is going to be top of mind for me until we get into April.
Yeah, definitely. Well, always appreciate your insights, Eric, for this week, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, Dawson.